Cases are logical syllogisms that attempt to prove the resolution morally obligatory affirmative, or morally prohibited negative. The typical though not mandated case is divided into a framework, which outlines the conditions for discussing the resolution, and contentions. The most essential part of the framework is the value structure, which is composed of an value, often called the value premise, that the case attempts to demonstrate the resolution action achieves is in accordance with, and a value criterion. The value criterion is a way to attain, achieve and quantify the nebulous value. In most modern NSDA resolutions, a value is often stated in the resolution. For example, resolved, just governments ought to ensure food security for its citizens. Due to the fact that justice is used in the resolution, it is an appealing value for many debaters. Morality is a common value due to its inclusion in many resolutions, followed by justice, social welfare, or other values depending on the topic. The framework also may contain definitions for purposes of clarity and/or excluding certain lines of argumentation, and preemptions spikes, that attempt to preclude certain arguments that one's opponent is expected to make. A narrow definition can be a spike. The contentions, of which this type of case must have at least one, links the resolution to the value structure. A proper contention necessarily has a claim, which summarizes the argument, at least one warrant, which is a reason the claim is true, and an impact, which explains the importance of the argument, or specifically why this argument meets the value criterion. In addition, contentions often include sub-points. For example, a negative case for the resolution, resolved, a just society ought not use the death penalty as form of punishment, could have a value of justice, a value criterion of crime deterrence, and then contentions that demonstrate that the death penalty serves as a uniquely powerful deterrent which would require statistical and possibly psychological evidence. An affirmative case could have a value of justice, a criterion of respecting human worth, and contentions arguing that killing human beings is inhumane for any reason regardless of their actions. It could also argue that all presently available methods of execution are inhumane. Lethal injection is believed to be physically painful and psychologically traumatizing, while hanging, electrocution, and gassing certainly are. The debaters would then argue whether practical crime deterrence or adherence to the principle of human worth is more important to justice and if each other's contentions sufficiently meet even their own value criterion. The value is not usually contested anymore since both debaters generally share similar ones. The narrative is a debater's attempt to win over the judge using emotional stories relating to the resolution. For instance, a debater affirming a debate resolution on food security may describe a story about an impoverished, hungry family. Although the critic, sometimes called AK, originated in policy debate, its use in Lincoln-Douglas debate is becoming increasingly accepted as a legitimate argument in some debate districts and states. A critic seeks to challenge an underlying mindset, usually from the perspective of critical theory. There are a few different types of critics. The resolutional critic argues that a fundamental assumption of the resolution is flawed or offensive and thus it can't or shouldn't be debated or proven true. For example, in the January to February 2014 topic, resolved, developing countries should prioritize environmental protection over resource extraction when the two are in conflict. A critic of the resolution would be that the resolution uses the words, resource extraction, opening itself to an anthropocentrism critic by assuming the world to be a resource for human use and degrading the moral character of nature. This critic would further argue that an anthropocentric mindset would justify major harms, which, in order to avoid, would require the win go to the side presenting the criticism. The discourse critic argues that the effects of an action one's opponent has taken during or in relation to the round should outweigh consideration of the resolution. An example of a common discourse critic is a gendered language critic, which could be used if an opponent's case has been written exclusively containing the male pronoun. Another example is if the opponent uses the F word in or out of the round, which opens the way to a bad discourse critic. A critic is generally composed of four parts: the role of the ballot, link, impact, and alternative. In order to make a criticism, there has to be a link, or reason. A link can be a certain phrase in the resolution, something the opponent said, something conceded in cross-examination, etc. The link opens the gate to the criticism. Now that the link to the mindset being criticized has been established, there has to be a significant harm linked to that mindset, or impact. For example, if an opponent links into statism, a harm or impact of this would be that statism justifies nuclear war or rights violations. An impact explains why the mindset is bad. In general, the alternative provides solvency for the harms proposed. Most alternatives look something like, reject the negative, reject statism, or something along those lines. The role of the ballot functions as framework for the critic. A role of the ballot explains how the judge should view the debate round. If a critic criticizes the ethics of the round, then an acceptable alternative would propose another type of ethic that should be used for reasons like better discourse. Lincoln-Douglas debate format borrows from policy format debate in order to create plans and counterplans. Sometimes negative debaters consider the status quo too hard to defend. A counterplan, also called a CP, allows the negative side to defend a separate advocacy that directly competes with the affirmatives. A counterplan competes in two ways: mutual exclusivity and net benefits. Mutual exclusivity means the affirmative advocacy and negative advocacy cannot happen together in the hypothetical world. Net benefits argues that the negative advocacy would be better in a hypothetical world than the affirmative advocacy. A theory shell, also called T, proposes rules to follow in a debate. The negative can do this by criticizing something the affirmative does that does not follow their vision of the debate. Shells include arguments such as that of disclosure theory and have become increasingly popular in the high school circuits. A theory shell consists of 4 parts: the interpretation, violation, standards and the voters. A theory shell most often uses fairness and education to weigh the round, but many other standards and values are used when debating on them. Sometimes, the affirmative advocates for a plan, which is a certain specified action which falls under the resolution. For example, with the January-February 2015 topic, resolved, just governments ought to require that employers pay a living wage, a plan could have been to bring the Asia floor wage to a living wage level. These arguments are often countered by theory, see below, or topicality. Plans originated from policy debate. Despite the growing popularity of affirmative plans, they are unacceptable in certain debate districts. In some states, the ballots used by judges instruct them to disregard affirmative plans. The only type of case that is virtually universally accepted is the value criterion contention structure, and even that has its detractors. Recently, methods of winning the round have become prominent that cannot be classified as true cases, because they are used as a semi-independent part of or in addition to the case proper, and do not advocate an extensively developed position. These include the a priori, or prima facie, argument which attempt to demonstrate that the resolution is true, false outside of the typical syllogistic model, most commonly by collapsing it into a tautology or presenting some reason why it's nonsensical. Theory, debate, which says that an opponent's argument or style of argumentation, e.g., talking too fast or interpreting the resolution in a certain way, is unfair or uneducational and explains why fairness or educational considerations supersedes the resolutional evaluation, has also proliferated. Like atypical cases, the merit of these types of arguments is heatedly contested, although both are common on the national circuit. Judges fall under many categories, the most common of which are lay judge, a judge who does not have experience in debate of any form, and is partial to basic and/or slow arguments. Usually parents tend to be lay judges. Flow judge, a judge who seeks to minimize intervention in the round by judging based solely on the arguments as made by the debaters in the round. Arguments are usually tracked in a shorthand called the flow. Classical traditional judge looks strongly on the ethics of the case and the philosophy that is behind it, especially when it comes to the value structure. They will not look highly upon spreading, which is the debate term for speed reading, at rates of 300 or more words per minute, during speeches, or progressive debate tactics like counterplan and critic. Policy judges look at all forms of arguments including those that come from policy debate. Policy judges tend to be flow judges. Experienced and qualified students are usually allowed to judge in the novice division. There are usually 4 or 5 elimination rounds in which the participators are marked by speaker points. 0 to 30 is the speaker point range. However, debaters are rarely assigned beneath a 26, and some states utilize a different points system, out of 40, for instance, in Idaho, and by a win or loss. Comments tend to be given by the judge to the debaters at the conclusion of the round. Comments are also written on the ballot, which is the document that the judge writes their decision on, as well as the speaker points awarded to each debater. Judges are often told before the tournament whether or not they are allowed to disclose to the participators, who won the round immediately following the decision. Speaker points are never disclosed. However, that being said, some judges will never disclose and others will regardless of what the instructions were. In some regional or national circuit tournaments with multiple divisions, less experienced judges are most commonly placed in the novice division, while the junior varsity and varsity divisions enjoy more experienced judges. Judges are assigned to a specific division based on their experience and some other criteria, and are only eligible to judge debaters within that division. A judge assigned to judge novices cannot judge varsity. This is known as a pool. Each division has its own pool of judges. At most national circuit tournaments, the judges within the varsity pool are often ranked beforehand from 1 to 5 by the debaters and their coaches as part of mutual judge preferences, MJP. A1 is the best possible ranking, a 5 is a judge with a conflict of interest regarding the debater, and a 6 is a strike, who may never judge the debater. Teams are usually allowed 4 to 5 strikes per tournament. During the tournament, the tabulation staff will attempt to give each round a mutual judge, i.e., a judge who is a 1 for both sides. Different debaters different judges depending on their past experiences and debating styles. The most preferred judges are usually former debaters who are now college students serving as assistant coaches, as they know the modern norms of debate well. Other regional circuits more heavily emphasize the rhetorical skills required in front of inexperienced judges, and recruit lay judges from the community. These judges are typically concerned citizens or parents of debaters from the school hosting the tournament or a participating school. Some circuits require all LD judges for rounds above the novice level to meet training requirements. Another option is to use lay judges for the rounds, but offer them a brief training session or tutorial beforehand to prepare and inform them about the nature of the debate. Nevertheless, lay judges tend to incline more towards the side they personally prefer. Many tournaments offer 2 or 3 divisions of competition in LD: novice, JV, and varsity. Novice is exclusively for new debaters in their first year of competition, JV is for talented novices or debaters in their second year of competition, and varsity is for experienced debaters. A typical one-day tournament holds 3 or 4 rounds. Each debater advocates each side an equal number of times or one side once more than the other, depending on whether the number of rounds is even or odd. Multi-day tournaments have 5 to 8 preliminary rounds in which all debaters participate. The debaters with the best win-loss record from this set of rounds then advance, called breaking, or clearing, to a single elimination stage of outrounds, that determines the eventual champion. All debaters present have the hypothetical potential to hit, or square off against, any other competitor in their field at the tournament, though if at all possible debaters are prohibited from hitting members of their own team and hitting someone they have previously hit earlier at the same tournament again. Similarly, judges who have already judged a debater are not supposed to judge them again in preliminaries. In contrast, a tournament in which each competitor must debate every other competitor is called a round robin. These tend to be very small, and specific participants are invited to attend. Most LD tournaments are power matched, also called power paired, or just powered. In this system, after the first 2 rounds, often referred to as presets, as they are randomly paired beforehand, the pairings for the third round are decided on the basis that people with the same record, known as being in the same bracket, debate. For example, a 2-0 would hit another 2-0, a 1-1 would hit another 1-1, etc. Speaker points determine who hits who within each bracket. The 2-0 with the highest speaks of any 2-0 would hit the 2-0 with the lowest speaks, second highest hits second lowest, etc. After the third round, the debaters' cumulative records and speaks, rather than the results of their last round, place them in their brackets. Local tournaments sometimes use randomized brackets throughout their whole duration. Other tournaments use a power-protected system during prelim rounds, in which a 3-0 would hit an 0-3 and a 2-1 would hit a 1-2. In elimination rounds, after the primary 4 to 6, or even 8, preliminary rounds, the top seed will hit the lowest seed. Seeding is determined first by preliminary round records and then by the number of speaker points awarded by judges in preliminary rounds, with various tiebreakers, total number of opponent wins, speaker points after the highest and lowest given to each debater have been subtracted, judge variance, randomly assigned number, etc. that follow should the statistics remain even. Most high school debaters participate in local tournaments in their city or school district, and travel to other areas of the state occasionally. Hundreds of such tournaments are held each weekend at high schools throughout the United States during the debate season. A relatively small subset, perhaps a few hundred, of high school debaters, mostly from elite public and private schools, travel around the country to tournaments on the national circuit. The current 9 largest and most prestigious competitive national circuit tournaments are, in no particular order, the Glenbrooks, held at Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South High Schools in the Chicago suburbs, the New York City Invitational at the Bronx High School of Science, the Harvard Invitational at Harvard University in Boston, Mass., the California Invitational at UC Berkeley, the Greenhill Fall Classic hosted by Greenhill School in Addison, Texas, the Heart of Texas Invitational at St. Mark's School in Dallas, Texas, the Harvard Westlake Tournament, formerly VBT, held at UCLA in Los Angeles, the Mid-America Cup at Valley High School in West Des Moines, Iowa, and the Minneapolis at Apple Valley High School in Minnesota. There are a few other prestigious national tournaments that cap the number of debaters from each school and total number of schools allowed to enter to preserve competitive integrity, and because there might simply be not enough space available. National circuit tournaments are very large events that typically draw 120 to 200 varsity LD competitors, in addition to LDers in the novice and JV divisions, policy debaters, public forum debaters, speech participants, judges, coaches, etc. Some of the biggest attract near 1,000 total participants. Regionally significant tournaments often also draw over 100 participants. National circuit debate is generally characterized by its extremely fast manner of speaking. 300 WPM is not considered an uncommon speed to read a case at, use of jargon, and emphasis on strength, depth of argumentation rather than rhetoric. However, some debaters have been successful on the national circuit without conforming to these conventions. The national circuit is mostly composed of traditional, power schools, with historically strong programs, e.g. Valley High School in Iowa, Scarsdale High School in New York, Greenhill School in Texas, or Walt Whitman High School in Maryland. The national circuit and its accompanying style of debate are sometimes criticized for being exclusionary. In particular, critics argue that national circuit, power, programs encourage jargon and esoteric norms not as a means of improving discourse, but as a means of deterring competition from the uninitiated. As the debate season comes to a close, national championship tournaments, collectively referred to as the postseason, are held to bring together the best debaters from around the nation to compete against one another. These tournaments require reaching certain levels of success at a qualifying tournaments throughout the season. The unofficial National Circuit Championship is the Tournament of Champions, LD talk, held at the University of Kentucky. To be eligible for the talk, debaters must collect at least 2 bids at various designated tournaments held throughout the year. They cannot be considered qualifying tournaments because they technically exist independent of talk authority and are significant in their own right. These tournaments are granted a certain number of bids by the director of the talk, Professor Angela Reed, with the input of her advisory committee that debaters receive upon reaching a certain level in the elimination rounds. The level of elimination round at which bids are awarded is subjective, but depends chiefly on the size of the tournament, the perceived collective quality of the debaters in attendance, and the quality of the tournament itself, whether it is run well or not. There are fluctuations in tournaments' bid levels and the tournaments that have bids in the first place, but the major tournaments have very secure bids. For example, the Dowling Catholic Paradigm held at Dowling Catholic High School in West Des Moines, Iowa is a medium-sized tournament attended by debaters of all experience levels mostly from the Midwest, and therefore receives 4 bids, awarded to the debaters who reach the semifinal round of the tournament. The Glenbrooks Tournament, considered among the most competitive regular season tournaments in the country, is attended by approximately 200 experienced debaters and has for many years had 16 bids to hand out to competitors who reach the octofinal round. For non-national circuit debaters, either the National Speech and Debate Tournament of the National Forensic League or the Grand National Tournament of the National Catholic Forensic League is the national tournament of their sponsoring organization. Competitors qualify to these national tournaments by placing in the top spots at district-level tournaments held specifically as qualifiers. The number of competitors in each district determines the number of competitors that will qualify to the national tournament. Most NFL districts have 2 to 4, but some NCFL districts have 6. There have been several attempts in the past to create a cohesive national ranking system. One was Fantasy Debate, which ran from 2010 to 2012 but is now closed. Currently functioning ranking systems include the Premier Debate Today Coaches Poll, the Briefly ELO Rankings, and DebateRankings.com. The three are aggregated in the composite poll on PDT. LD Debate follows the basic time schedule 6-3-7-3-4-6-3. Each debater gets 13 minutes of speaking time, and 3 minutes of question time. The rounds take approximately 45 minutes. Each debater receives 4 to 5 minutes of prep time to use between speeches however they like. While the amount of prep time is at the tournament's discretion, the NFL advocated 3 minutes until midway through the 2006-2007 season, when it decided on 4. Some tournaments, most notably the Talk, choose to give debaters 5 minutes. Some tournaments also allow the use of flex prep, which melds the cross-examination time and prep time together to create a 6 to 8 minute block that can be used for questions and/or prep. Asking cross-examination questions during prep time is generally accepted on the national circuit. Most speeches start with an order often called an off-time roadmap, because it's given before the speech starts. The roadmap states which order the arguments and flows will be addressed in before the time starts, i.e. the order will be topicality, K, CP, DA, then case. This format might be hard to remember, but over time you will get it. It just needs some practice and time. NSDA resolutions topics to be debated change every 2 months. They always propose that a specific policy or issue, the resolutional policy action, conforms to a certain principle, the value. The affirmative must uphold the resolution, and the negative must show that the action does not conform to the principle or that the affirmative has not shown how it does so. There are different schools of thought as to the negative's burden. 10 possible resolutions for the upcoming year are chosen by a wording committee and released at the NSDA National Tournament. Anybody can submit a resolution for consideration to the wording committee. Each coach in the country receives a ballot with a copy of the official magazine of the NSDA, the rostrum, and votes for a topic for each 2-month slot. Voting can also be done online. Until the 2007-2008 season, each coach could only rank the topics on one list, with the one receiving the overall highest ranking becoming the national tournament topic, the second highest becoming the March to April topic, the third highest Jan-February topic, etc. However, because of the prominence of the January to February slot, the Talk and several other tournaments not actually in January or February elect to use this topic, resulting in it being jokingly referred to as the 6-month topic. Coaches now select their 3 highest choices for each 2-month slot. The resolutions of the NCFL National Tournament, UIL, which includes LD Debate as one of its academic contests, and NCFCA are selected independently of the NSDA resolutions. Recent resolutions include, resolved, the abuse of illegal drugs ought to be treated as a matter of public health, not of criminal justice. November–December 2010, March–April 2019, resolved, the United States ought to guarantee the right to housing. March–April 2017, resolved, public colleges and universities ought not limit constitutionally protected speech. January–February 2017, resolved, the United States ought to limit qualified immunity for police officers. November–December 2016, resolved, countries ought to prohibit the production of nuclear power. September–October 2016, resolved, in the United States, private ownership of handguns ought to be banned. January–February 2016, resolved, in the United States criminal justice system, jury nullification ought to be used in the face of perceived injustice. November–December 2015, resolved, adolescents ought to have the right to make autonomous medical choices. September–October 2015, resolved. Just government ought to ensure food security for their citizens. March–April 2015.